Good morning, everybody. It's Hammer. Today is Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. Of course, I'm here with the Daily Mortgage Rate Update, the only place on the web where you can get together at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and we talk about what's going on with mortgage rates and pricing and all that good stuff. I need a name for the show. What do you guys think? Do I need a name? Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas for a name. I probably will tie this to the Rate Sensei brand. Should I create a name around this, around that Rate Sensei brand? I'll show you guys the logo and stuff when I come back from North Dakota next week. So, but you know, the text alerts and everything, we're going to be pushing out that brand, that Rate Sensei brand. But anyway, I am here this morning. If you're here, say good morning. If you're watching on the replay, don't forget, just give me hashtag replay in the comments. Let me know that you were here. If you would like a reminder that I'm going live each day, I send out a text message, and that can be important on a day like today when I'm late. I'm late by about 5 minutes today. Sorry, was handling a couple things. Anyway, hmmr.io/reminder, or use this cool QR code that's over here on your screen. And even if you're on your phone right now, take a screenshot and it'll work in your photos. Love the way that QR codes have come along in the last 10 years. They've been around for a long time, but they were really useless at the beginning. Anyway, that's it. That's what we got going on this morning. If you're here this morning, say good morning. Today, we're going to talk about what's going on with JOLTS. Is it a jolt to the economy? Is it a jolt to the labor market? What do we got going on with JOLTS? What effect will that have on your rate sheets today? We'll talk about that. We're going to talk some more about the Trump Fed virus. The Trump Fed virus. Trump is infiltrating. It's like the Matrix and shit. And we're going to talk about, have we seen this before? Have we seen this before? I told you yesterday I was going to tell you a story today. If you remember, I said I was going to tell you a story about the Fed takeover and what happened last time the president, which was Nixon, had sway over the Fed. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to go deeper on that. I'll do that a little bit later in the show after we go over the other stuff. You guys know the routine. First things first. Let's go ahead and say hi to all the live folks here this morning. Thank you all for joining me. Appreciate y'all being here. Will Patterson tagging another originator. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Cecilia, I hope you do watch this. Ron Siegel, are you the only one having trouble getting the show on the Facebook or Originator Success page? I don't know. Let's see if anyone else does. Right now, if I look at my numbers, there are 8 people on the Originator Success Facebook page. So I would say yes. Randy says YouTube page is better anyhow. Appreciate you on that. Story time with Uncle Hammer. That's right. And I even got my Uncle Hammer hat on. I usually go with a pinch front, y'all. This is a cattleman cap here. We've got the regular cattleman. I don't usually do that, but I don't like a high. You know, if it was a short cattleman, but I don't like the way they said high. I feel like it really kind of elongates my face. But good morning, Holly Johnson. Good morning, Tiffany Teal. Will Patterson, we got Angela Walters, Mallory Fotiadis, Robert Bashirs, good morning, sir. Leroy Romero, good morning, Leroy. Leroy, thank you for the support in the VetaVA community as well. When I post the rate forecasts, I always appreciate you making comments on there. Thank you very much for that. Megan Bassell, Brandy Brickler, Mike Brown, great to see all of you, Mike Tebow. Yeah, you know what? I grabbed what was handy, Randy. It's not a full straw day, but it was over there. We could go black felt. It's kind of whatever I have in the desk. I got to clean up. Shit's messy. Not gonna lie. But partly I want to move up to the barn. Anyway, we're soon. So, all right, let me get on to the other stuff here, y'all. Let's get to the good stuff. So, quick recap. There really were no big moves yesterday. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at the technicals, and we'll go over all that stuff with you. So if you've been waiting, here we are. Take a look at the technicals. Let me zoom in here. You don't need to see my head. Let's get rid of that. All right, let's zoom in over here. Boop, 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 boop. Refresh the page so I can scroll, baby, scroll. All right, so taking a look here. There were really no big moves yesterday. I mean, you know, things were boring. You know, we came out with pricing right about here. We ended the day right about here. There's a little bit of improvement there. Not much. Basically, no reprices better. No reprices. I feel like I'm like I'm spray painting this, except for I have 2 R's now. Anyway, no reprices. Didn't really see anything better yesterday. Nothing that's going on there. Rate sheets today a little bit better than yesterday. I mean, if we take a look here this morning, when pricing came out, we were right around 140-ish. Right now, mortgage bonds around 144. I mean, you're talking just a tiny bit. Actually, we were around, around 138. But anyway, there's a little bit of a move there, so we can go ahead and that is a sad smiley face. There we go. All right, so we came out right about here. Pricing's right about here. A little bit of a green line. So we moved up a little bit on the day. Nothing to get excited about, though. 10-year Treasury yield, 4.26. That's also a little bit better than where we were at yesterday, but just a little. Ended the day yesterday at 4.26. Right now we're at 4.26. So, that's flat, but we spent most of the day yesterday above that 4.26, and we're not nearly as low as we were a little bit before that. Take a look here at the Japanese candlesticks and all that good stuff. We'll get a vibe for that. Reprice risk on the day is low. Bonds did kind of bounce up, fell down, kind of holding steady here. Nothing to get excited about. We do have JOLTS data coming out at 10 a.m. After that, there really shouldn't be any big moves. Nothing that we have to worry about. So the JOLTS data, job opening, labor turnover survey data. So the JOLTS data is the first of the, it is definitely a more looked at jobs report than like the ADP report. Doesn't get a ton of movement for mortgage bonds. But the JOLTS data is, if there were a lot of job openings, that means that there is a robust labor market. When there's less job openings, that means that the labor market is constricting. So we'll be looking for signs on that. Of course, layoffs and turnovers. Haven't seen a lot of layoffs. There's just not a lot of new job stuff. In fact, when you look at like the Wall Street Journal, job cuts, price. Oh, let me move this so y'all can see what I see. Do you see what I see? Let me move this over. Okay. So when we take a look here and we go yeller, job cuts, price hikes fueled this season's bumper earnings. There you go. Job cuts and inflation. So when you take a look here, behind the season's bumper earnings, companies making money. Haters going to hate. Companies going to corporate. They're always making money. Consumer spending isn't driving company profits as much as reducing expenses and improving efficiency. That means they are cutting people, and that is not good, y'all. Blah, blah, blah. I don't need this here. So American companies once again beating profit expectations. This time around, they aren't banging on blockbuster consumer spending. Instead, the latest batch of quarterly earnings getting a lift from managers who are squeezing out costs, boosting productivity, turning out new technologies. Companies from Monster Beverage to Estee Lauder said that they are holding down hiring, often while finding new ways to get employees to work more efficiently. Got to squeeze more blood out of that stone. And they are raising prices when they can. What a surprise. And this, my friends, is called inflation. So none of that is good. Not really loving any of this that we see here. Let's go ahead and look at the other headlines. Yes, that's right, Ron. We got stories and serenades from Uncle Hammer. All right, so the other stuff that's up on Bloomberg this morning, U.S. Treasury yields brush with 5%. They're talking about the 30-year Treasury yield. We don't normally talk about the 30-year, but the reason this is important is this is all about the long-term borrowing costs. And this is what the government wants to bring down. Now, remember, when we talk about the Fed virus and Trump's Fed virus takeover, the Trump Fed virus and the Trump Fed virus takeover, there's hold on, let me get rid of this little thing here. Bloop, bloop. There we go. All right. So when we talk about the Trump Fed virus takeover, they want to lower borrowing costs. That's the reality. They'll say sound bites like, it'll lower mortgage rates or car loans. That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it because of the borrowing costs. Our borrowing costs are too high. Right now, what we're seeing, according to articles like this, we're seeing situations where, basically traders just don't want to fund the borrowing and all of that. In the U.S., the moves underscore the pressure on the government from investors who want more compensation. They want a higher yield if they're called on to finance spending plans and tax cuts by the Trump administration. So this is especially why the tariffs were supposed to kick in and offset some of the other stuff that was put on here. A lot of spending. And we've talked about this. The government spending, all of this stuff that's in their budget bills and the cap, lifting caps on the debt ceiling and all this stuff, it has consequences, and these are the consequences. And long-term bonds are pushing up to the psychological level, the 30-year climbing 4 basis points to 4.999. Does that not strike you like a homeowner that doesn't want to pay 6%, but will pay 5.999, right? 4.999, which is a terrible situation. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on. Higher borrowing costs on the long term don't necessarily equate to higher costs on the short term. Remember, that's where like Fed futures and the Fed cutting rates. The Fed is expected 91% expectation for the Fed to cut rates in September. But what we're looking at here is the idea that September rate cut is going to help those short-term rates, not the long-term rates that we're seeing. Here is an opinion. It's important to notice this is an opinion article. Can bond markets finally be making sense again? Rising long-term yields around the world show the basic laws of microeconomics still apply. Higher risks result in higher rates. So that's, we've seen a lot of things change in the way that finances work and Wall Street finances. For decades, betting long-term bond rates would rise was known as the widowmaker trade. It was simultaneously the most sensible and most consistently money-losing wager an investor could make. This be the month the trade finally pays off? The logic remains sound. As rich countries grow older, like the United States, they are spending like crazy, like the United States, and they have no earthly way of paying for all their debt, like the United States. So it stands to reason that rates will go up eventually. And yet for most of the last 20 years, rates didn't go up. They went down. This defied the basic laws of economics. Some economists said they no longer applied. Policymakers believed them and spent even more. Rates have finally gone up the last few years. The 30-year bond yield rising in almost every rich country except for the Swiss. So, this is not just a U.S. thing. It is across the entire globe that we're seeing these kinds of things. So, again, here's more on that, why long-dated bonds are falling out of favor. Now, again, this is kind of like the big cousin to the 10-year Treasury and the 10-year Treasury yield. So let me make this smaller. No, we don't need it that big. So looking at the 10-year Treasury yield, we're watching that as well. And mortgage-backed securities are going to play off that 10-year Treasury yield. So, the 10-year is still considered a long-term bond. It's not a short-term bond. So as we see the 30-year going up, generally it's going to pull that 10-year behind it. And we want to keep an eye on that and pay attention to that. So otherwise, what else we got going on? FUD's Musalem signals policy in good place, warns of risks. Fed Reserve Bank of St. Louis President Alberto Musalem said interest rates are well positioned for the current economic environment. And that's... this really, listen to what the different Fed members are saying. We'll talk about that Fed, that Trump Fed virus in a minute. So, but taking a look here, you don't lower the Fed funds rate just to lower the rate. They want to get it to neutral. Neutral is when the labor market has maximum employment and price stability, meaning inflation at 2%. If inflation is higher than that, then your Fed funds rate is generally going to be higher to slow down the economy, slow down borrowing, slow down spending, and bring inflation down. If your employment situation is weak, you need to lower that borrowing rate so companies can reinvest and grow and hire more people. Now, the world is changing, though. These are kind of just economic norms that we've grown used to. But what happens when you do have companies that are basically, looking to get more productivity out of less people? What happens when you have this scenario here? And AI allows them to do it. What if AI does allow companies to increase profits and grow, but yet it doesn't lead to more hiring and more people, and they're not growing in a way that requires more labor? That's a problem. And that's something we could be looking at. So That's why this stuff's not as cut and dried as people want to say that it is. It's not. And the world is constantly changing. And as AI is changing, and y'all know I'm not a huge fan of AI, getting a little bit better now, starting to use it a little bit. But a lot of things about how it's going to be great and you create agents and all this stuff. It makes shit up. So anyway, let's go ahead. It's story time. Let's talk about Nixon. And let me tell you the story of a guy by the name of Arthur Burns. Arthur Burns, so we'll get rid of the tomorrow part of this. So here's the story. So Arthur Burns was the chairman of the Fed and chairman of the Board of Governors from 1970 to 1978. He served 2 consecutive terms as chairman of the Board of Governors between 1970 and 1978. Burns, blah, 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 where he was born and all that stuff doesn't matter. But he was the Fed president during Nixon's time in office. Now, I'll give you the TLDR section here. All right. What went wrong in Arthur Burns' time as Fed chair in the 1970s? For those of you that don't know, basically Arthur Burns is the one that created a huge boom bust cycle with the Fed. And a lot of this, though, is attributed to his relationship and run with Nixon. So basically, regardless of the ultimate source of Arthur Burns' motivation, his actions in the Federal Reserve helped trigger an extremely costly inflationary boom bust cycle. By election day in 1972, the Fed had already started its monetary tightening. The Fed funds rate had risen from 4.49, so we'll call it 4.5, in July to 5 by election day. As Nixon had told Burns in February of 1972, I really don't care what you do in or after April. 1 year after the election in November 1973, the Federal Reserve had hit the monetary policy brakes in earnest. In the year since the 1972 election, the discount rate had been increased from 4.5 to 7.5%. To 7.5%. The federal funds rate by July of 1972 had risen to 9.71. The civilian unemployment rate, as usual, a lagging indicator, continued to plummet, falling to 4.8% in November 1973. So they were trying to get unemployment down, but huge increase in the inflation. The eventual elimination of wage and price controls in 73, excessively aggressive monetary policy in 71 and 72 produced an inflationary boom. The inflation rate measured by the change in the consumer price index, the CPI, the same one we do today, for 1973 was 9.6%. In response to the post-election Federal Reserve tightening, the economy swung into a recession. So this is the boom and then the bust. In November 1973, 1 year after the election, the recession lasted until March 1975, but even this recession was insufficient to stop inflationary pressure. The inflation rate for 1975 was 6.7% higher than the rate that precipitated the earlier wage and price controls. It was not until Paul Volcker became chairman of the Fed in 79 and the 80 and 82 recessions occurred that inflation was finally brought under control. Now, if Trump is able to infiltrate the Fed and if he were to drive rates down, that would create a huge inflationary problem. And we would see something very similar to what we saw in the past. Now, why did this happen and what started this? If you'd like to read all 12 pages, but basically Richard Nixon pressured Arthur Burns, and there's evidence from the Nixon tapes. And here's some of the sections where they kind of, discuss about that and the archived recordings. I respect his independence. However, I hope that independently he will conclude my views are the ones that should be followed. Sound familiar? And then, he goes through and he wanted the Fed to, speed things up and get it going. So let's see if it talks about here. In 1969, President Richard Nixon nominated Arthur Burns as the chairman. Burns took office in 1970. Respected economists, blah, blah, blah. He was an authority on business cycles. He did this, he did that. Herbert Stein. Nixon demanded Arthur Burns supplied an expansionary monetary policy, which is what Trump wants an expansionary monetary policy, growing economy in the run-up to the 1972 election. And, he wanted to see everything. So the growth rates, wanted to see the economy growing, GDP growing. Look, this 2.8, 3.5, 7.7. It's going to be great. It's going to be the best economy you've ever seen, blah, 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 blah. I'm not doing that impression. You get the point, though. And then you look at inflation, it skyrocketed. So this is why it is bad when a president who has different motivations and mandates than the Fed is in charge of the Fed. I see people that kind of beat up on Powell and the other Fed members. They've done a fantastic job getting us through COVID, post-COVID, and what they've been dealt. They really have. I'm sticking my guns on this one. I really think they have. The idea that the U.S. would it be better for us to be borrowing at a much lower cost if we were to lower rates and do things, and that would create that? In a perfect world, sure. But there's repercussions to all the actions. Just like now we have home prices that have skyrocketed because we had quantitative easing and super low rates, during COVID. There's always consequences to the action. So you can't just see the Fed start chopping rates and thinking this is a great thing. The Fed is trying to run a balance between inflation and employment. That's their job. Ron said, does Trump want an expansionary policy or does he want neutral? He wants expansionary. They're calling it neutral, but it's not neutral. He talked about that it should be down 3 points, dude. That's not neutral. That's not even close to neutral. I would argue that as of right now, we've been in the same Fed rate for a year and it's been pretty close to neutral. Inflation was still starting to drop down, and now it's ticking up a little because of the tariffs, but it's still holding steady. Unemployment 4.2%. We could argue that all those numbers are made up, but if you give them any kind of credibility, now we know the real world, what we're seeing out there, but when you look at the policy. Julie Herman, I disagree. Powell takes too long to respond to movements and kept rates way too low for way too long and started this epic fail. Julie, I respect you disagreeing, and you are entitled to your opinion. However, having low rates, I can't disagree. It would have been nice to see them, the whole inflation is transitory thing. Were they perfect? No. But there's such a slow, it's like turning a cruise ship, this is not a speedboat. So you're absolutely right. But I don't think that he always acts way too long. And I don't think that the board acts way too slow. It takes too long or acts too slow. So that's my take on it. But I certainly could see that. COVID had tremendous repercussion in all areas of life, unicorn and arguably needless. Yeah, I don't want to get into that. I'll just start. Ron agrees with Julie. Powell's horrible, too political. And he loves that him and I can debate respectfully on it. Absolutely. Ron, you really think that he leans Democrat? That he leans liberal or Democrat? That's why they cut rates? Again, if they were going to cut rates for Democrats, I think they would have started a lot earlier in 2024 rather than September. Yeah, needless repercussions, dude. I totally get you. Right. Nixon demanded, and there was argument that he was friends with Burns and, worked that relationship. Different way of going about it, but same result. Martin raised the Fed funds rate in 65, caused inflation too. So what do we learn from Nixon, Burns, or Johnson, Martin? No real definite correlation. I think it's a stretch. No, I wasn't going for NPR reporting. Don't worry, Ron. I was only going for the archive sound bites. They were easy to read there. That was why. I certainly am not going to use the NPR as a source by any means. Now, Siegel is, by the way, definitely more educated on this stuff than I am, for anybody who's watching. So he talked about like Nixon Burns battle of 72 and Johnson Martin of 65. I will go back and research Johnson Martin to see the association there. Again, I'm a student of the game. So thank you for bringing that up, Siegel. I accept the challenge and I will go look at that there. So let's see. Where am I? I'm going for my captions here. All right. So heads up, y'all. Tomorrow, I may not have a show, and if it is, it will be very late. I will be on an airplane, and you just can't do lives from an airplane, even with their Wi-Fi. You're not allowed, and they don't work. So I will be dropping down in DFW at 10 a.m. So that's 10 a.m. Central. So that's 11 a.m. Yeah, there'll be. Let me redo this. No live tomorrow. Yeah, there's no way I'll be doing it live tomorrow. It would have to be either like crazy early or crazy late. So no live tomorrow. Y'all will just have to read the written, and we'll go from there, my friends. So I will be on an aeroplane going to North Dakota. A buddy of mine has a hot air balloon, and there's a big hot air balloon festival. And then a couple of other buddies of mine, we are going to be the ground crew and the chase car for his ballooning. I did this last year for the first time, had a fantastic time. It was a whole hell of a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to doing it again. So I will do something on Friday, especially because it's jobs data, but it might be messy because I remember we were out there and we did not have internet. So I will see how this goes and how this all plays out. So we will see. We will see. So keep an eye and we'll do there. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Ron, I didn't read the whole NPR article. I actually just grabbed that right before I hopped on. I had actually read the this one here, which is from the actual Fed. So this is the Journal of Economic Perspectives from Burton Abrams and professor of economics, blah 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 blah. So this one. And it was actually, it's in the library for the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. So I had actually read this one is what I was going through and what I had gone about. But it's not easy to find stuff in here. I figured those sound bites on the other thing were a little easier. So that's why I did that. Mike, you've had 3 hot air balloons land in your backyard. That hopefully you weren't upset about that, and they were usually respectful. It's very cool to watch the whole breakdown and see that. Randy said, have Ron do it. Siegel, if you and I got your text, dude. I'm so sorry that I've been traveling and I didn't reply. So I'll reach out to you, Ron, about your text and see if you want to do the live while I'm out. You've got fans that want you, so let me know if you're interested in that, my man. Reach out to me. If you don't hear from me in a minute, reach out to me about it. Let me know if you're game. I'm certainly game. And I know you'll do an amazing job. So, all right, y'all. Well, anyway, if I don't see you for a while, thanks for joining me. If we can get Ron to do it, I absolutely will. And if not, we'll have to just see how it rolls. So, all right, everybody, I will keep you posted from the road. Take care and have a fantastic one. Bye-bye.